Welcome to Code with Kurt. The channel brings you the latest Google Sheets and Google Apps Script videos. In today's video, we're going to be doing a web app CRUD application. With that, we're going to be using Bootstrap to do the web app as well, the CSS of Bootstrap, and we're using a Google Sheet to store our data that we are using the web app for. And in this example, I'm doing addresses, city, state, street addresses, and an email as well. And with that, I got an ID for each record to be unique so I can delete and update each record. So in this application, I got my form here. I can do a search. If I don't do anything, populate anything, I hit search. It's going to pull all the records in that I have on the table. And I could search down. So if I want to just search this first record here, I could just put in the first name. It doesn't have to be uppercase, lowercase. It'll still find it. So now I got one record pulled back, the first one. Also with that, I can add a record. So I can go So I got my record that I want to add. I just hit add record. And it adds it and it also searches the criteria after add it. So you can see that I added in. I could go back to my table. There it's added right in there. I can also do an update. Say I want to change this to just ST instead of street. I just hit update here. It'll go back to my table and update there. Or now it's just street on my last record here. And I can also just go ahead and delete this. So I can click delete. It's going to take it out. And now it is gone. I could clear the record as well right here. So this is just an application where I can, again, create a record, update it, delete it, and then search all my records using this web app. If you're new to this channel, subscribe to catch my latest video. Let's get started with this video. Here I am on my new Google Sheet. I got it named Web App CRUD. I got a header record of ID, first name, last name, street, city, state, zip, email, and create date. And that is all I have on this sheet. It's just that header record. And my sheet name is data. So next I'm going to go to my script editor. I'm going to give my project a name. Web App CRUD. Rename it. Next I'm going to copy in my Google Apps script. There I have that copied. Next I'm going to create my HTML file. And I'm going to name it WebAppBoot, the same as what it was over there. There I have that. Next I'm going to copy in my HTML code. I have that copied. I'm going to hit save. I will post this code in the video below in the comments section so you can copy and paste it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the Google Apps script code. I'm going to go through the code here, what I have here. So the first thing that gets this thing going is the doGet function. That's a Google Apps script function. And I'm calling WebAppBoot is my HTML file. And I'm creating this as an HTML output from file. I'm not doing a template. I'm just doing the HTML output because I'm not going to do any Google Apps script code within my HTML. I'm doing a lot of JavaScript in this video along with the Bootstrap. So this renders my HTML file up. So this comes up and I'll go through how this HTML file is set up. The first thing is I got my Bootstrap link in here. This is my CSS link. If you want more information about where I found that, I do have a video on how to get started in a Bootstrap web app. It is tagged above the video here. And you can look at that to get the understanding of where to get this and link this in here. So I got this right here, and I'll have this within the code anyway so you can copy and paste it. So the next part is my JavaScript and all the functions that are there, and I'll kind of go through that later. And then down here is my HTML code. So I got my header, end of my header tag, beginning of my body, and then my form tags here, and then I just go through the first name, last name, street, city, state, zip, email, and then I got my search records button, my add record, and clear record. So this is like the first opening screen here. I got all my fields out, I got my search button, my add record, and my clear record. And this is the first thing that comes up. And that ends my form here. And then my last thing here is my row data. Now this is where I'm going to put in, after you do a search, all the data that comes back. I'm going to populate that here. And I'm going to do that with JavaScript. So once that's up, we'll go through the search records first. So say I click search records here. Well, that's going to take me up. That's going to call a JavaScript function that I have set up here. Right here, this function called search records here. Now what these things are going to do is it's going to grab all the data that is populated in the field. So say you're going to search for the first name, and it's going to grab the first name, but it's also going to grab everything else. It's going to take all the data that is populated or not populated, and then I got a row number populated here. I'll explain how that works. Next call is I'm calling a Google Apps Script function. And that function is set up. This is all wrapped in one tag here. This is the beginning of a tag. And the function name always lies on the bottom here. So I'm doing search records here. And I'm passing all these values to the Google Apps Script function. First name, last name, street, city, state, zip, and email. So I go back over here to Google Apps Script. I'm going to go to search records. So I got passing all these values coming in. I'm setting up a return rows array here, and then this first one is I'm going to grab all the records in my Google Sheets, and this is calling a Google Apps Script function called get records, and I believe that's on the bottom here, right here. So get records, I got a return array. I'm doing a spreadsheet object here, declaring that. I'm declaring my sheet, which is data sheet, again with the data name here, and I'm getting the last row. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a for loop through here. And what I'm looking for here is I'm looking for the ID that's not equal nothing. So I'm going to grab all these records here where the ID is not equal nothing. Now the reason I'm doing nothing here is because when I delete a record, I'll go to my Google Sheet here. So say we have 10 records here. When I delete a record, I don't take the row out. And that's kind of important here. I leave the row in and I just clear the record out. And what I'll do is I'll repurpose this row when someone adds another record. So if someone adds one in, I'll fill that in before I go to the bottom. And the reason I do that is because I use the ID along with the row number to identify the row that I'm working with. And that is important for updates and deletes, that these are matched up. If I say I have a delete function, say multiple people are using this, and one person deletes a row out while somebody's updating a row, it could skew the data up a little bit because, again, you have to find your row ID, and then you have to go to the row number to update the record. But if two things are happening simultaneously, it could skew it up and you could be updating the wrong record because you dropped a row out and the ID and row number don't match up anymore. So it's very important that these things match up and go hand to hand always until you clear it out. If you clear it out, well, then you got row 6, and row 6 will be open till the next record comes in, and that'll help with multiple users. So we'll go back here. Again, I'm getting all the records where this row ID is, not row ID, the unique ID is empty. And I'm loading an array here, getting the values and loading the array. And then I'm returning that back up to the search. And from there, I'm going through all the records here. I'm doing an evaluation. So basically I'm doing is I'm taking the first name. If it's not equal nothing, then I am taking the value here as I'm cutting through my array, this is a multi-dimensional array, so I'm going through the first value, which would be the first name, and last name would be the second value, and so on, across the row. So it would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in my array. I'm doing an uppercase, and I'm doing the uppercase as I'm putting it in, so it's not case sensitive. So if I type in a name, it doesn't have to be all uppercase or lowercase. It'll still search just the letters. If there is, I'll get a valuation of true. If not, I'll get a false. And if I leave it blank, so say it's not equal, say it is equal to nothing, this is where the else comes in, then I'll say it's true. So that means that row is ready to pass in because we're not even searching it, so we'll say it's go. So again, I'm pushing all of these evaluations to an array, and then when I get down to the bottom here, I'm doing this for all the fields, and if I don't see a false in any of the fields, then I'm going to push the data row to an array here. So I look at each one of these fields. If they all equal true, then I'm going to say, okay, let's push that to the return rows. So it's going to go through each row, do that evaluation on the search, then it's going to return the row back to the screen. And that brings it back to here, which it then returns the array back to here, this AR, this function that's within this call. AR would be the array, and then this is where I set up my table. So here's a console log AR. This is a way to display it for debugging. This is not necessary, but this is a way to debug through the web app. Then I'm declaring my display table. This is the information, the HTML coding that I'm going to be putting together. I'm concatenating this each line. So I'm starting with the form table. I'm calling it main table. This is my header record, name, address, email. These aren't really needed here, they're crossed out. I can delete those out. So you got your name, address, and email. Then we're going to loop through this array. So we're basically getting the records back, and now we're going to put the data within our table. So this is a bunch of HTML, but I'm going to highlight some of the things because basically this is just table tags of TR and TD, which is row and column. And then we have some Bootstrap calls of these classes. This is just to let it know the length of which I'm wanting to put this at, and also some other Bootstrap within the inputs. This form control with each input. But the important thing is the row number. So here's the row number, and I'm doing a row number here. So I'm establishing a unique ID for this row. Row number plus the number. And again, I'm starting at 0. And that goes for each one of these IDs. So each input has up, which means update first name and then row number. Update last name, row number. Makes each row unique, each field unique. So when I'm doing an update, I'm just depicting the one row that I want to update. And I can pull the unique number here, attach it to this to get the unique value that's coming out to update. So I'm doing that each row, and I'm counting it up, and then that displays each row of mine with an update button here and a delete button as well. So now I got my search done. I searched the rows. It's all displayed on the screen. The next thing I'm doing is, let's say I want to update a record. So here's my update button right here. Say I want to do the first record. So this row number would be 0 basically. So again, my values update. I'm going to click. It's going to be on this on click. I'm going to call this function, and now I'm going to pass the row number with it. So let's go up here to my JavaScript. So here we got update record right here, this function here. So again, I got my row number. Now I got my button here, my update button plus my row number, because I'm again picking the row that I want to update. And I'm going to disable that update button because I don't want it to be clicked multiple times. So I'm disabling it. Once someone clicks it, I'm going to disable it. The first thing I'm going to do. Next thing is I'm going to grab all the records here. And you can see how I'm passing this row number in. So I'm doing the up record ID row number. Update first name row number. Again, that specific row, I'm pulling all the values out of that row. And then again, I'm calling this Google script run, which is my, going to call it Google App Script function. And that function is update record and passing all these values in. So I'm going to go back to my Google App Script. Over here, I'm going to find the update records one, which is right here. So I got my record ID, first name, last name, street, city, state, zip, email, passing those in. Again, declaring the spreadsheet, the data sheet, getting the last row. I'm grabbing all the table values of the Google Sheet in here with this function and storing it in this array called table values. And now I'm going to cut through the array. So now I'm going through each record of the array, which is a multi-dimensional array of the spreadsheet. And then if that equals the record ID that I'm updating, which is the first record, again with this I and this 0 would be the first one. Next, I'm going to update the row number specific to this data. So again, this is why it's important to have the record ID and the row number kind of attached to each other at this point. So now I'm going to set the value of the first name, last name, street. So I'm going to set everything when I update each value, and then I'm going to return with a success. And the reason I got a +2 here is because my array value is always going to be 2 rows off from my actual row number value, and that's including because the array starts at 0, the rows number start at 1, plus I'm skipping a row for my header record. That's why it's +2. Again, if you don't want a header record in your Google Sheet, then you would have to do a +1 there. But that's why I have a 2 to kind of link it back up so my ID and my row number are comparable with each other, and that's where I do the updates. So again, return back success. Go back over to my HTML, and then once that comes back, my success returns here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that button and unfreeze it, take the disabled off and make that false so it could be used again. So that's for my update record. The next thing is my delete record, delete button. So again, I have a delete button down here with the row number. And again, this on click, delete record, row number. So I go up here. Here I got my delete record. Right here, my function. Kind of works pretty similar, except I don't have to grab all the extra field data. I just need the record ID because all I'm going to be doing is deleting this. So I grab the record ID. Again, I'm calling a Google App Script function, delete record, passing the record ID in. So I go back over here, right here, again the spreadsheet, data sheet, last row, grabbing the array, table values, cutting through the array. If it equals that record ID, then I'm going to grab the row number, and then I'm going to clear the content of between the A and the I columns over here. So I'm just going to clear the data. I'm not deleting the row, I'm just clearing it out. I'm just opening up the memory basically, so I can, if someone is adding another row, I can fill that in, and then I'll fill to the bottom. So that is the delete. And the last thing we have to discuss is the add record. So again, the add record is all the way on the bottom here. So again, this are, as we're bringing up our initial sheet, we got the add row here. So if someone fills out all the fields on that initial first sheet, they hit the add row. Again, it's going to call the add row function up here. And now I'm going to take the add button, I'm going to disable it. So again, no repeat clicks. Then I'm going to grab all the information of all the fields here, first name, last name, and all that. And that's all built in on these IDs of street, city, state down here. Grab all the fields, making sure they're all populated with this if statement. If they're all populated, if they're not, it's going to send a message back and say, please enter all information. It's going to unfreeze my button. If they do populate everything, it's going to call a Google Apps Script function. I go back over here. Here I am passing my records into add record. The next thing I'm doing is getting a unique ID using this function, UID. And that function is up on top here. Function UID. I'm setting up an array of UUID, unique ID. Setting my spreadsheet object, my data sheet, getting the last row. If my last row is not greater than 1, which means I'm looking for records within my Google Sheet. If it is not greater than 1, which 1 would be my header record, I'm looking for another record. Then I'm going to go down here and just return a unique ID. Basically, if my table is empty, then I want to return the first ID. I don't have to go through and search it. So if I do have records in my table, I'm going to grab all the values out. I'm just going to grab the unique IDs out. I'm converting them into a single array here. This is a multi-dimensional array. This is a single array. I'm setting up a variable of count. I'm doing a do while loop here. Basically what I'm doing through here is I'm checking each ID to make sure it's not used already. And I'm checking the array using this -1. So basically if it's not found, then I am returning the value that I got up here. And if this doesn't come in here, then I'll loop through again, grab another ID, check it again to make sure, does it again. Basically, it does it up to 5 chances. Now, the chances of ever getting to 5 is very, 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 very slim. I mean, it would take forever. You would have to have almost a billion records in your table to ever get to 5 by chance. So, we're pretty safe with 5 here. I just put in something there so it just doesn't keep repeating itself. So now we return back to our add record here. We're doing a found record false. Found record false. We're doing our spreadsheet, declaring our data sheet, getting the last row. We're starting with row 2. We're not doing our header record. We're going through, and if first name equals nothing, basically, we're doing the first column here. We're going through, here's where we're going through each row, and we're seeing if we can find an empty space within our Google Sheet. But if we find an empty space, then we're going to go populate the data into that. We're going to be setting all these things up. We're going to say return record true, and then we're just going to break. If we don't get this, if this just keeps going through and we can't find an empty record, well then we're going to get a found record of false. Then we're just going to add it to the end of the table. And then we're going to return a status of success. That'll take us back to our HTML page here. And once we get this returned back, we're going to do a search records, which basically is it's going to take all the data we had set in our form, and we're going to search that record just to make sure it went back. And that record that we added should appear at the bottom then. And then we're going to unfreeze our button there. Unfreeze our add button. And then the last function is our cleared records. And all that's going to do is just going to clear our form. Again, we got a function down here called clear records. That's going to call this Google Apps Script up here. And that's just basically going to clear all our fields out. So that is a high overview of what's going on here. Now I'll just go ahead and get our web app started here. We go to deploy, new deployment. We go over to type. I'm going to hit web app. I'm going to give it a description. I'm execute as me and only myself. I'm going to hit deploy. Now it should take me to some permissions set up here. Alright, we're going to authorize access. We're going to select our account. We're going to hit advanced. We're going to hit this. And we're going to hit allow. So there we go. We got our URL that we can use to access our web app. So now we're going to click that. Now we can go ahead and test it. So I can put in, add a record here. So I can go ahead and add a record here. Go ahead and add it. The record is now added in here. I can go back to my Google Sheet. There the record is right there with its unique ID. So that concludes this video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave it below the video. Until next time.